Hello, everybody, and we are here on Phoenix 92.5 FM with Nerd to Know Basis. And with us, we have Bryn.
Yay!
And we have Katie.
How's it going, guys?
Hi!
How are we feeling, everybody?
And we have Kev.
And I am Kev. I also, yes, me. Yes, Kev.
The star of the show.
I don't know, that's a lot of pressure, you guys. I don't think I've got started in me.
Not with that attitude.
How's everyone's week been?
It's been, I feel like I haven't left since last week. Is how I feel. I feel like I blinked and it's another show.
We're
doing 2 shows a week now.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, not block recording. We're not block recording. That'd be a crazy thing to do.
No, of course not. No. I just decided to change it, and I just changed it into a different T-shirt to fool everyone.
Not even. God,
I mean, this isn't like Bake Off. But this isn't like Bake Off, where they come in the second half of the episode and they're like, it's day 2, but everyone's wearing the same clothes.
Yeah. I don't even know why they lie. It's clearly pre-recorded.
Yeah, why do they even need to like it's okay to be like, oh yeah, we baked all of these things in one day. That's more impressive.
Yeah. I feel bad for them though, like especially because they're done during the height of summer.
Yeah.
In what looks like a Pyrex tent.
Pyrex tent with a lot of ovens in it. That's
full of ovens, yeah.
That is swamp central.
And low-powered fridges.
Yeah. Couldn't be a good time. It couldn't be a good time at all.
Yeah. Although I have to say I am very much enjoying I am very much enjoying the Celebrity Bake Off right now. It's a guilty pleasure.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it, apart from the fact that it's just Matt Lucas on his own, and I can't stand him.
Yeah, I miss Noel Fielding. I know he's on paternity leave or whatever, but I miss him.
Yeah, he shouldn't be allowed to have paternity leave.
No, I've been following him on Instagram just to get my fix of him lately, and he's just doing like the most bizarre paintings. It's fantastic.
Of course, that's just Noel Fielding for you.
Yeah.
I suppose just we are as a news channel. Probably have about some news.
Yeah.
The most
surely not.
Surely no. That'd be an insane thing.
Yeah.
Biggest news story I think to break, at least as far as I'm concerned, is the announcement that Sony are closing the servers for the PS3, PSP, and PS Vita online stores. I think a lot of people saw this coming inevitably, but this is the guillotine in that now. I think it's coming at the end of June.
Yeah.
And I can't I see why. Yeah. They're already 2 generations on this, and I'd say the player base of the PS3 has dropped significantly.
It's kind of one of those things though. It's like everybody was expecting it, but you still get sad when it happens.
Yeah.
It's definitely like you can expect it, but like I'm definitely torn up about it because that's like. Yeah, that's PS2 games pretty much just lost to time now. There were so many of them that were ported to the PS3, but there's a lot of them that have been done to PS4, but not nearly as many as was the PS3.
Is there any on the 5 yet?
They'll come.
I think so. Not really. Like it might be like maybe the ones that were ported to PS3, or PS4, but not nearly a library.
Right.
You could get like all of the Sly trilogy, all the Ratchet & Clank trilogy, all the Spyro games, all of them. They were all ported just 1-to-1 on the PS3 store. They were just emulated basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, so unless you pick them up between now and the start of June, that's that. They essentially have been just relegated to retro stores.
Yeah.
Get in quick.
It's one of those things where like, if anything, I'm kind of surprised it took them so long. But that's more just because of how much I'd expect them to go like 2 or 3 years into the PS4's life cycle and go, okay, we're done with these now. Sorry, bye.
I'd say at least fairly wide into the PS4s. I'd say the PS3 player base was still very strong though. It was a very popular console when it really hit its stride. Like it was very late really hitting its stride with the incredibly high markup when it first released. But when they cheapened the models and worked out the kinks,
yeah,
it sold very, very well and became a very, very popular console. I'd say it was only halfway through the PS4's life cycle when the base PS4s dropped in price to their level, did it probably actually see a player drop off. But even then, it's still it's got some of the most popular games of all time on it now.
yeah. Well, I think
obviously in the Xbox 360.
I think it's kind of true though. Of all these kind of generations, when people say oh, we've got the most popular games of all time, it's yeah, well, games are on them. That's gonna happen eventually.
That's fair.
I mean, maybe this is my perspective. Maybe this is me showing more of my age, but I would still look at the PS2 era and go the games on that, the quality of games there is far better than the games that came on the PS3. But that's also because the industry was also entirely different. It wasn't I mean the PS3 and Xbox 360s were heavily marred by war games dominating player bases.
That's fair, yeah.
That is a major difference, whereas there's still a level of going, well, we don't really know what sells and what doesn't sell in the PS2 Xbox, the first Xbox era of games, because you'd get Onimusha and you get the Suffering, but then you'd also get a bunch of Star Wars games. You get you get Shadow of the Colossus, which is still one of the best games I've ever played, even on the remakes of it. But I think again, for the PS3, this again still has great games. Infamous 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. It does very wildly though.
It's going to be very interesting because this is the first. No, actually, I'd say the Wii was probably the first, but now we're starting to see the closures of
major
consoles
stores
that were heavily on. Sorry.
Major stores.
Well, no, actually, consoles that relied heavily on the internet. So a lot of where when the PS2 closed, they were just physical discs. They're still being swapped around. Now we're seeing the closure of stores that relied very heavily on online connectivity, and those servers are just gone now. So it's going to be interesting to see how the secondhand market and just kind of the reselling of the PS3 games now are going to go forward, whether or not they might just kind of be classed into redundancy after a while. There's I think there's probably a point in the later PS3 games where it might not even be possible to play them from the disc alone. And it'll be interesting to see if you can still actually download the data from that onto your PS3. Now I know they've confirmed that. Now I know they've confirmed that if you obviously anything you purchase digitally is still yours. You can still download it. It'll still be banked on the PlayStation Network. It's just the store is being closed.
But even still, it's gonna get to a point though where first they take the store, then it's the cache of different patches and stuff is the next thing.
Yeah, that's it. It is this is what happens when we've moved kind of into a very digital heavy space.
Yeah.
Things become a lot more transient.
Yeah. Well, this has been a conversation we've had on the show a bunch of times where we've talked about why archival is actually very important and a major issue in terms of something for consumers, because we if you want to go and play if you want to play a historical game, you need to have a level of compatibility to do that. And it's because again now it's still possible to go and find films from the 40s and actually just watch them, but there's not really that same level of care for historical for games in terms of because the evolution in technology has been massive, and it would be nice to have a way of documenting that and being able to show, well, this is Chrono Trigger, this is why Chrono Trigger was really important, and here's how Chrono Trigger plays. There's none of that really, and I'm just using that's the first game that came to my head. Obviously it's much older than PS3, but if someone ever wanted to play Haze, God knows why they want to play Haze, but if they wanted to, if someone wants to be able to play it in the modern age, there should be a way to do it, you know,
without just hoping to whatever studio that may own the rights to Haze decide to port it to whatever the most current gen console is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like there's definitely like it's also just a problem with kind of the games industry as a whole. Is there's a lot of IP hoarding, and we'll just like they will take an IP, sometimes a beloved IP, and just hoard it and not do anything with it, not re-release it, not release old games. No, like Konami, terrible with that. When was the last time you saw a Silent Hill game? Like,
oh no,
or like like the PS3 was the last time I saw somebody mention like that's like you just can't get Silent Hill games now with the PS3.
If you want
the old Silent Hill
if you like pachinko, you can get Silent Hill games, you know, but that's kind of it, you know, like.
I suppose in a very literal term, yes, that is a Silent Hill game.
It's just not the game you want, but it's a game.
It's just
you know,
yeah, so like I definitely
it's
think,
funny that they haven't done it, because surely, I mean, like Silent Hill and Resident Evil get brought up, and with people of a certain age, they get brought up almost interchangeably with horror games they loved from when they first started playing games. And one of them was getting remakes upon remakes upon remakes, and constantly getting reiterated. And then there's Silent Hill, which is just
Konami are crazy people. Like it is unfathomable to imagine how they actually what they are thinking.
Yeah,
because they have a cache of just some of the most beloved game IPs ever created, and they just do nothing with them. And like even to the point where like they are actively losing money. They just have it's a crazy thing where it looks like they have no interest in making video games at all.
Yeah.
But just have to make one a year pretty much to keep the IP.
And
Metal Gear Survive or Contra terrible game that they made.
Yeah. The only game they seem to be interested in making year in, year out is Pro Evolution Soccer. And that's it. You know.
Are they still making that?
They are still making it, yeah. Because they still, I don't know why they're still making it, but they are. But it's the only thing I've seen from them make in the last couple of years, like in the last year or two. As like, I mean, it was that, and like I think the last game before that was Metal Gear Survive. You know.
Yeah, like no, they had a Contra game last year. But
yeah, that was what that game was. Yeah.
Yeah. So like it's I just don't understand why they are just like obviously they're keeping the IPs because of the pachinko machines, but I don't see how they. I just don't understand because I think there has to be a legal way where they can keep the IP for licensing rights, but then just sublet these licenses out and just make games, and then they make money. That's the thing. It's like,
basically what you're describing.
I don't understand.
It's basically what you're describing is what Marvel did to keep afloat before they went bankrupt in the 90s. You know, like I mean, if you imagine, like, it won't happen, but like just for a second, imagine what would happen if the likes of an Obsidian Studios got their hands on Metal Gear Solid. You know, and just
or a Capcom got Silent Hill.
Yeah. Or if Ninja Theory got to do a Metal Gear Revengeance 2. You know, there's just some fun ideas. It's you know, it's this thing of like, remember the first one of the other instances I heard of this before was like, imagine if like if Disney never changed the public domain laws, and we'd live in an age where Batman and Superman are both public domain characters, like right now. And imagine what could be done if both of them were public domain.
Well, first of all, it wouldn't be.
It's crazy.
I wouldn't have to pay like 30 quid for a Batman trade pack. That's one thing.
Yeah, that is one thing. Absolutely. You know, but as well as that, like you could have like every movie studio making a Batman movie, and you know,
some of them might actually be good.
Yeah, some of them might actually present Batman as the way Batman's supposed to be presented, but you know, like, you know, but I've been waiting a very long time to see an accurate representation of that character. I'll get there fully one day, but
I'm glad you have faith.
Yeah.
We live in hope.
Hey, look, it happened once and it was in the 60s, and that's fine. So
well, I suppose talking about games that won't really be stored away into the forgotten annals of history. Something that I think is going to be timeless no matter when, and is always going to be available is tabletop RPGs.
Oh, totally. It's becoming more popular. So.
Oh yeah, and to use this incredibly smooth segue, Katie has introduced us to one I had never heard of before. So for the person who has been incredibly quiet this whole podcast, Katie, please.
I was just biding my time. No, so I am definitely one of those people who has jumped on the bandwagon over this lockdown, because I've noticed a lot of people are playing tabletop role-playing games now, which is great. It's a way for people to be more social, because we're all, I think a year into it, we're all feeling pretty isolated at this point. But we recently discovered one called Morkborg. And it's basically, for anyone who's not familiar with it, it's basically like a Swedish death metal version of Dungeons and Dragons, but with slightly less rules. Like it's not so heavy on the stats and what you can and can't do and all this kind of thing. And it's just really fun and gruesome and weird. And, I am loving it right now.
It sounds incredibly rad. We were talking about it before the show. So actually, because I don't actually ask you, so is it a D20 system?
Is it a what?
So it's a D20 system. So is the core kind of like gameplay involved rolling a D20?
Yeah. Yeah, but you do other things as well. So I don't know how it works with Dungeons and Dragons, but certain weapons are different dice. So you might have to roll a D6, but then you have to roll like a D4 for damage or something like that. It's very cool. And I had no experience with any of those games before, even though I make dice, but that was just more because I really like the dice. So it's been really fun picking it up. And for a game that's designed to be it's basically designed to be unforgiving and kill you any chance it gets. It's actually been one that's really easy to get into, just because it's very light on the rules. So it's kind of more up to your DM what they would, if you're like, can I do this? Can I do that? It's more up to them to say, well, let's see, rather than say, no, that's not in the rules.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's always I think it's always very dull when you get any kind of RPG going and then you get a rules lawyer, either as a player or as a DM, especially if it's a DM, just coming around going, well, no, actually, technically speaking, if we look here in the rules of this, that can't happen.
Well, I mean, there is an element of that, but it's kind of more for us. It's more a case of, let me double check. It's not so much here are the rules. It's like.
But if you look at page 340, you'll see that that's not allowed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of more of a thing. Usually we're just checking stats or something.
But no, hang on a second though, Kev, because if it's I understand what you're saying, but I have Zarathus's Guide to Everything, and they revised that rule. So technically speaking, it is possible because of these four.
But deuce is on you because they reneged that in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything.
and so it goes,
Yeah.
And the cosmic ballet goes on.
Yeah, so it's been really nice, and it's basically how I got into it was my partner used to play D&D before lockdown hit, and so one of his party found this other game and he wanted to DM and he wanted to try it out, but he wanted people to kind of try it out on, and not necessarily people who were kind of big into it already, who knew the rules. So he asked if we wanted to play, and I was like, oh, that sounds like fun. So it has been really, really fun, and it's kind of good as well for me. It's because, like you guys were saying, it's more of an improv situation, and you're getting into it, and the more you play, the more you get into the role play aspects, instead of just sitting there going, am I allowed to do this, am I allowed to do that? You're like, I'm gonna do this.
Well, that's always when it gets really fun.
Gonna
wreck it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my character is at the moment is not so much wrecking stuff because I'm still very squishy. Like I started off with 1 HP and light armor and a femur for a weapon, which did like no damage. So it was for me, it was kind of more avoiding, escaping from fights as much as possible and just being crazy. And I ended up being like the dancing one who, instead of fighting, I just like distract people with my dancing while the other guys go in and hit them and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, no, like I've definitely seen, because obviously D&D is very number crunchy, and I'm into that. I actually do like the crunch. I like the nitty gritty. I like to do maths. I'm weird. I love that. But I've seen some systems that are very role play heavy. One that always I never got to play it. But there's a system called Monster of the Week that I heard about it through. If either of you heard about the D&D play show, the Adventure Zone, it's the McElroy's D&D show.
Cool. Yeah.
Their second season, Amnesty runs the Monster of the Week. It's about a cryptid ski lodge was how my friend sold it to me. But unlike D&D, where you're kind of like your big adventurers that kind of grow stronger and become, larger than life figures, you're just dudes. Like it's set in West Virginia in a forest, and you're just humans. You've got like 3 hit points, and one of you as a park ranger.
Brilliant.
So that's like there's the role, and that's actually why I was asking if it was a D20 system in Morkborg. Am I correct in pronouncing that?
Morkborg, yeah.
Yeah.
Morkborg.
Yeah, Morkborg.
Is because Monster of the Week, it runs a D6 system where you roll 2d6s to like make your decisions like you roll a D20. And I think that's really interesting because like that's just a much narrower margin of error. If you like rolling a 1 and not 20 is pretty gruesome. Rolling a 1 on a D6 to make that decision, you're like, there's no room for it. This is going to be bad.
Yeah. No, I'm really bad for that stuff because like I'm still, we're only 2 weeks into it at this point, and we don't know how long the campaign is, but we've just finished kind of the first campaign, or the first dungeon, I would say. But I'm really bad because like the DM will say something like roll a d10, and I'm like picking up dice, going, "Oh, is it this one? Is it this one?"
That happens with every player at the beginning. You just kind of like you learn what the shapes are, and you go, "This is what it is." Eventually.
Yeah. Like I know the D20 and the D6 and the D4, and then the rest of them I'm kind of like, oh, which one of these is it?
Yeah, basically.
Pro tip: the D8 is 2 D4s butt to butt.
Basically, yeah.
Hang on, I have to get a set of dice here.
There's I've been reading up on like there's a wrestling RPG as well called I can't remember what it's off the top of my head. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's wrestling one as well that uses a 2d6 system as well. And again, it's that terrible thing of like, well, the margin of error is terrible because 1 in 12
rolling dice is stressful now.
Yeah. Like, I have one of the guys in my party actually. I don't know how, but he has a penchant for rolling natural ones. But he's smart about it though, because now he exclusively plays as halflings who get to re-roll every natural one.
Oh, nice!
He's playing the rules.
Yeah,
he's playing the player.
But I mean, we were kind of having a similar problem where we were like in the actual, when you're exploring and you're looking for things, we were doing like okay on average, and then it was the case where we were getting into fights and instantly rolling like 2s and 1s, and it's a wonder none of us died.
Yeah,
it's funny actually. In the campaign I'm running, which you can watch over at twitch.tv/Connorrain, by the way. My party, it was written in the campaign. I'm running Odyssey of the Dragon Lords. It was a Kickstarter, Greek mythology themed campaign. Load of fun, really cool.
Odyssey, give us money.
Yeah, lots of money. Very brave browser.
One of the things written into it is there's a magical NPC who follows you, who kind of initiates the campaign, and follows you because they want to write about your exploits. One of the feats they have is on their turn, they can basically cast a spell that allows all the party to re-roll any dice once during that turn. And like at the start, I looked at it and was like, that's ridiculously overpowered. That's something that is taking the game and snapping it over their knee. But we've been running this for 4 months, and I don't know if it's that all 7 of my players are just bad at rolling dice, but it has been incredibly clutch moments where they'll have rolled something with advantage, which is when you roll twice and choose the higher. Both rolls are terrible. And they'll be like, oh god, oh this is awful. Wait a second, Song of Heroism, and they hit that nat 20, and it's erupted. So I think that there is a lot about giving your players that kind of extra thing.
Yeah.
Where it might just snap the game over its neck, over its back, but it makes it more fun.
Yeah, exactly. And the more fun a game is, the more people are going to want to play it. Like if you're getting killed every 5 seconds, it's not as fun. Like when we finished the first dungeon, I kind of went online because I was like, oh, the DM was withholding some information that he was like, you guys never discovered what it was. So I was being cheeky and I went to research it, and someone had blogged the same campaign. And it was like they had 4 players, but all of their players were playing 2 characters each because they just kept getting killed. And it's like, that's not as fun though.
Yeah, I think that there's a conversation like that. Again, that's something that I think has to be a conversation with your DM, where it's totally cool for to make a high lethality campaign.
Maybe as a once-off though, not for a whole game.
Oh yeah, make it short, make it a thing.
Yeah,
famously, the one of my favorite RPG shows to watch is Dimension 20. College Humor, their streaming service Dropout, one of their big shows is Dimension 20. It's D&D shows, and they did it's the premise was Game of Thrones but Candyland. Going into this, they A Crown of Candy, it's actually stunning. It's so good. But one of the things was because they're doing Game of Thrones, the DM Brennan was like, this is going to be an incredibly brutal campaign. I am out to kill your characters in this, to the point where each of the characters, when they made it, had to fully design backup characters. So I think you can definitely do up a very strictly high lethality campaign, but I think that's something that has to be known going into it.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You can kind of alternate it.
Even in historically, in the way that D&D was originally written in its first edition, it was made so that lethality was kind of built in mechanically, because rogues were designed where they would level up faster than everyone else, but they'd also have no hit points, so they'd have comparatively no hit points, so they'd die super easy. So you'd go, which is great because you're going, okay, great, I got to level 4, but you die very quick, by the time everyone else is on level 1 or 2, and they die super easy. So it is something where it historically lethality has been there, and I have seen people discuss before that they find that the way the current edition of D&D is written is it's too easy to not die, because you're given loads of hit points, and as well as that you still have to do death saves, where it's just basically rolling 5d20s, and if 3 out of the 5 are successes, you pass, which is statistically quite achievable. So it's just one of those things where it really depends. Again, if you're building a campaign where you want lethality to be there, some of those rules you just kind of go, no death saves, which
actually
to make it more manageable.
I played a campaign with a DM who was very just I want to kill you guys. And one of his home rules was that your death saves carried over.
Oh, yeah, okay.
No, again, he's this was
explain that for the layperson.
Essentially, when you fall to 0 hit points in D&D, you just fall unconscious. You're not dead. And you basically, as Bryn said, you have to roll a death save. Where if you roll a 10 or above, it's pass, 10 or below, it's failure. 3 passes here and you're stable but you're still unconscious. 3 failures, you die. That's the end of that character. But whenever you get healed and you get back up, they always reset in rules as written. So like you always have a lot of, as Bryn was saying, you always have a lot of chances to get up and to not die unless you really roll poorly.
Yeah, and if the rest of your party just decides to not help you.
Yeah.
You know.
But as my friend Mikey used to play, was that those saves, as I said, they didn't reset. So if you get knocked out, say save it once but fail twice, and then you get back up, go about your day. If you get knocked down again and fail one more save, that's it. You're dead.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Now again, that this was all disclosed before the campaign started. This was one of the things he said. So like it was something we knew going into it.
Yeah.
So we knew to expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of those ones where like I need to have a full-on conversation with the DM about it, because they go like, hang on, so like we could go 4 sessions without my character going down, where there's been days, if not weeks, in between sessions, and you're telling me that like because my character several days ago had a near-death experience, I'm now dead. Okay.
It's been a while. I think they reset on long rests. I think that was his.
Yeah.
Like it's been years since I played a game where he ran. But I think it was long rest. But like it was one of those things where they didn't reset immediately as soon as you got up. So there was that extra tension.
Yeah, but that's a great idea actually, if that's how it is, because like that means at least that like it would push you to be a bit more conservative with how you play. Which again, when you're in a world that has everything from liches to dragons wandering around the place, maybe you should be a bit careful. Like,
hey, maybe don't be a jack in the box.
Yeah.
How about not murder hoping? How's that for an idea?
You need to not Leroy Jenkins your way into every situation.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like I'm always open to seeing more like rules like games, because almost all the other games I've ever gotten interest in playing in terms of tabletop games have always been rules heavy, like Warhammer or Shadowrun. I don't know if either of you have ever played Shadow. Well, I'm assuming you've never played Shadowrun, Katie, but Kev, I'm assuming you've never played it. Have you read anything about Shadowrun? I've never played
Shadowrun.
Shadowrun,
not much. I've heard it mentioned, but I don't know like specifics.
Yeah, Shadowrun is the crunchiest game I've ever seen. It can legitimately take hours to do a single combat encounter, because like it's like, okay, so you're going to throw a grenade. Okay, roll to see if you can throw your grenade. Okay, so it's exploded. Okay, roll for shrapnel damage. And then it's like roll to see if shrapnel hits other people. Okay, then roll to do damage on that. And then like it just completely extrapolates out, and you're just like, this is horrible.
It takes the fun out of it almost.
But, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, in my opinion anyway, like the more realistic you try to make a game mechanically, the less realistic it's going to be. 2, the longer it's going to take everything to go through. Like, sometimes it's just a bit easier to go, okay, roll to hit. Okay, you have to beat 12. You've beaten 12. That's it. Done. Roll for damage. Like sometimes those things just work better than having to go through going, okay, so you hit a spring. Now that spring, I have to see how that reacted to this thing. It's just not fun.
Okay, hold on there while I just pull up the jump calculator.
Yeah.
What's your base speed? That's that plus the square root, and what's the axis of the actual world we're on? Okay, and the moon's in centerfold. Okay, cool. You move 30 feet.
And like I get that works for some people, but I'm not one of those people that wants to have to calculate things in my spare time.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I would say that even though we've said like D&D is crunchy, I would still say like as games go, it's as crunchy as it can get without it being so bogged down in detail that it becomes like an absolute slog to go through. The only time when really I think D&D gets lumbersome is when it comes to doing spell casting, because that's when it can be like, okay, because it's a really common request from a DM, and it's a fair request, but it does take up time, which is, okay, what does that spell do again? And then you have to explain the rules for each individual spell, and that can just take forever.
I remember the first time I sat down with a DM. It's the first time I played a spellcaster, and I was looking through. I was like, okay, so I'm at second level. That means I got second level spells, and they're like, oh no, that's not how that works. It's like, what do you mean my spell level is different from my class level? What is this nonsense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it has its moments of getting bogged down, but outside of that, and outside of like spellcasting and combat are the two times when number crunching is the kind of like really matters. Everything else is, I think it can be as crunchy as you want it to be.
Yeah, it can be as simple as addition or subtraction. But
yeah, like I've seen games where like the players don't even really roll. Like I've seen, depending on how you want to play it, but like where the players don't even really roll dice, especially like with kind of like beginner players. Like this is your first time playing a tabletop RPG, where the DM will kind of shoulder all the burden of dice rolling, of like, tell me what you want to do, or like maybe take your d20 rolls and that's that, and then like I'll do all damage rolls and attack rolls for you. Just take that burden off of you if you just want to just literally play the game. Just do what you want.
Yeah, I've also seen the inverse.
But like, I quite like the whole rolling the dice aspect. It's it adds that little bit of stress, but also it's quite satisfying to just roll a dice.
Yeah, I have seen. It's one of those things I've seen where there are like ways of playing games where like it's entire player facing, which means that like you're rolling for your attacks and their successes and failures, but you're also rolling for your enemy's attacks and being successful or failing against you, and you rolling your own damage and stuff like that, which I think is super interesting. Now again, the problem is that like if you've got like the problem is that if you have like 8 players, that could take a very long time to do combat, because they're basically going through 2 different sets of rolling, So, but then again, if that's what you're finding, then you probably would just go, okay, we're just going to do group initiative, and it's going to be enemies on one side and everyone, and I'll just say you're attacking you, they're attacking you, and so on, and then you tell me how you're attacking the
buddy system.
Yeah, basically. And then just making everyone roll at the same time, just to make things a bit easier. Like there are ways around it, but it's a case of like getting heavy into homebrew at that point, because you're homebrewing mechanics. But these are always options. But even then, I mean, the deeper you get into most RPGs, the more you're kind of want to homebrew anyway, because you're always going to find certain things that you're not going to be too happy with how rules are written. Like personally, the 5th edition Bleep spell I think is terrible. So I rewrote it for my. Oh
yeah, yeah. That's I think I looked at taking that for like my bard I played, and I just looked at like what roll 8 dice and. Yeah. Subtract that from the HP and however many people. This is dumb. Yeah. This is dumb, and I hate it.
And it doesn't get powerful with more levels, which is like, so it doesn't scale. It's just like, okay, this is good for 2 levels, and then never again.
Make it a Constitution save. It's that easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, and I think that there's definitely a case to say about like when you hear homebrewing, you think that's I need to know every rule of this game to even consider homebrewing things. No, I want to be the one here to say you don't. No. Like obviously you have a base understanding of kind of how the game basically works, but like homebrewing is literally just I want to do this thing and I can't find it.
Yeah,
I'll make it myself.
Or like or you see a rule, or you see a rule and you think you disagree with it, so you try to improve it. Like those are the 2 kind of modes that people kind of fall into homebrew on. Like I remember seeing this online, but I can't remember where it was. Like rules are made to be optimized. Which is pretty much the homebrewers.
They're more like attitude. Guidelines, really.
Yeah. Again, it's a first draft.
Like in the Odyssey of the Dragon Lords, there's a segment of like the end of the first chapter where where it wants the characters to swear an oath to an oath, basically an oath of fellowship.
Mm.
But like I was reading it, it's like, oh, so did they get any boons for this? Mechanically, they didn't get anything. They was like, yeah, we're friends now, handshake. And I was like, that's pretty anticlimactic. So I went and designed a whole feat tree where I'm
awesome.
turning this into a power of friendship app.
Oh, this was the one
this
you
is what I'm
sent us, wasn't it?
I had said this. It's good. Yeah, it's because I got so excited when I made it, and I know I couldn't send it to anyone in my D&D groups. Like, you guys need to see this.
Yeah.
And so far, and I'll say it like because one of my players is actually sitting over there working. So I'll only tell you about like the first feat they got, which was that they can use the help action as a bonus action between each other once per long rest. Which means, yeah, like they can just like make somebody like literally just help someone for free because they've sworn this bond of fellowship.
Yeah.
And I think like definitely that kind of breeds into kind of like keep making them closer companions. It's mechanically it's awesome. Like this is a boon you got.
Yeah.
And like as they level up, they'll get more stuff.
But as well as that, something like that, like what I love about a rule like that though, as well, is that like that also just gives players more options in combat, which just again it's one of those things where like I'm not big on like having like multiple different outcomes for stuff, but having multiple ways to get outcomes, I'm always going to be, you know, like it's why I love the optional rule of flanking. I think that's great because again it makes combat more tactical, which I think is great. And I think anything that does that, anything that makes it more tactical or makes players think more about what they can do in combat is always a better way to play, you know.
Agreed.
Yeah, like as much of a fighter apologist as I actually am, there is a reason they get clowned on. Where like, you know, when you're kind of sitting there in combat and you see everyone kind of doing all these spells and tricks and kicks and they're, you know, rolling that, they're like, hit him with my sword.
Yeah. That being said, I have in one of my parties we have a fighter. It's also that halfling, by the way, halfling fighter, who's a champion. So she gets critical hits on 19s, which again rolls a 1, next one's a 19, happens so frequently. Also has 2-hand crossbows, so she gets 2. And she also took a feat at level 4. I can't remember what the feat did. But basically, she has like something like 4 or 5 attacks. She has something like 4 or 5 attacks at level 5, and yeah. So you know, it's
see this is why I'm a fighter apologist.
So this is basically what I'm saying is that like, yeah, I mean, people can clown on fighters all they like, but when you can do stuff like that, it makes it hard to argue with it.
Like, you know, you hit with stick, but they do a real good job at hitting with stick.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's been fun.
Yeah, but that's like the joy of it though, is that like, because I mean, like D&D is absolutely, between this show and D&D, that's what got me through this lockdown.
Yeah.
Without those two things, I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely recommend. And I am seeing more and more like people you wouldn't even expect to be playing those kind of games are now playing them. And I do recommend it because it's easy. It's an easy way to be social because it's an activity that you can all be doing together.
Yeah, because you can use like, I mean, like there are platforms like Roll20, which people can use for playing online. But as well as that, I mean, like, you can use Zoom or Jitsi or any of those other.
We just use Discord.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then that's like if you watch the streams, our Discord heads are just sitting there on the side half the time. We don't do anything special. That's it. We just roll dice in front of us.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot you can do, and it's definitely, if you're looking for a game that's easy enough to get into, like I would recommend Morkborg because that's the only one I've played and I know it's rules light, but there are probably others out there as well.
Yeah. But there's a great site called Drive-Through RPG, which is like, if you're interested in playing RPGs but you have no idea where you want to start, all you know is you're kind of going like, I'm not that interested in D&D because you don't want to do like a strictly like a high fantasy setting. Fair. look at Drive Through RPG. There's loads of options there. I would personally say don't play Shadowrun because I've just found it horrifically dull. But there's loads of different choices. I mean, like, it's a very, very deep well because the general fan base for RPGs is quite wide, you know. So like, and again, like something like Monster of the Week sounds cracking, and I'll probably have a look at that when we finish up here.
Another one shout out is a system called Masks, similar to Monster of the Week actually, but its setting is like kind of, you know, Marvel DC superheroes. And all the kind of the archetype, like all your kind of classes are your archetypical kind of hero types. And again, it's very like Monster of the Week, where it's D6 systems and it's all very, very role play heavy. It's not very number crunchy. We one of my friends in my D&D group, they got us to basically make Masks characters with the hope that they were going to run a campaign at like later on down the line. But then my campaign is taking forever. And like it's in the back burner, and we'll get to it someday. But we are sitting on characters.
Yeah, fair. That does happen as well.
That's also the other thing. It's just fun to make characters.
Yeah, and you have them ready to go whenever you need them.
Yeah, that's always been like the fun thing. Is like, trying to create characters. Like I got kind of like locked into a hole of going, okay, I need to make characters that I can take seriously, but they need to have something fundamental to them that makes them pretty funny as well, you know. And that's been always like a hard part, like a hard balance to set. You know, usually doing it through, I usually try to find a way to do it through like either like their general behavior or just something in their backstory that just makes them a bit more that makes them just a bit more funny to be around. Like I have I play a Drow arcane trickster who hates high elves to such a point that he will run off in the middle of battle just to find a way to elaborately mess with that high elf, you know.
Or you could do what I did in the mystery campaign I played with my friends over Christmas, and just make a goblin, but give him a gun.
Who needs courage when you have a gun?
And it's one of one of these things. It was the artificer class, which is in the new book, and it's one of these things. My friend Eric thinks it's the funniest thing, especially in like high fantasy D&D, where you've got all these people, you know, swords and sorcery and spells, and this one's got a gun.
It's very Indiana Jones of you.
Literally.
So it's like, I don't know why, but I'm imagining it's a goblin in a pinstripe suit with a Tommy gun. I don't know why that's...
And a fedora.
Oh, no.
Of course.
No, he was... We played a mystery campaign, but in the run-up to it, all of us decided on the characters together, and we decided we were a pirate crew. The person running the game fully were like, you're not on a ship. You are on land. Like, no, we're a pirate crew. Like that's, and the whole Grizzle was the ship's engineer.
So what you're telling me is that you created the perfect crew for the Salt Marsh campaign, and then you just put it in the wrong place.
I think they're gonna play the Salt Marsh campaign with us like next year because we were just like, yeah, we just want to get back to our boat.
Oh, you should make them all PIs for the Salt Marsh campaign.
But no, Grizzle was a dirty little greasy goblin. He talked like this because his name is Grizzle. A Grizzle who speaks in third person.
Yeah.
One of my favorite little things actually I did with that was because he was an artificer, he got spellcasting, but it made no sense for this goblin to have magic. So all of his magic was tools. Yeah. Like he had the grease spell, which was just an aerosol can with like WD-40 in it. Or he had Ray of Frost, which was a liquid nitrogen canister on his back attached to a tube on his hand because he kept setting fires. And this was his way of putting that in.
Oh, brilliant. That's so good.
So like, yeah, I love kind of just like thinking of ways to kind of make it fit the character.
That's genius. Yeah. Oh god, it's one of the best things. It's one of those things I love about D&D is that you get to just have that level of customizability in it.
Yeah, and I love that you can even do it as you go. So like we're only 2 weeks in and we're still figuring stuff out, you know, and the DM was saying to us, okay, you finish the first, because basically the premise of the first dungeon is that if you do the job, like it kind of starts off like Oblivion, you know, you're in prison and if you go do this job, you get your freedom back. So he's like, okay, you all have your freedom. Now you have to start coming up with like backstories and you know, you want to come up with like motivation to keep going in the world, and maybe you want motivation to like actually stay with the party that you're with, because you know there's no reason for you guys to stay together now. And it's just one of those fun things. And like my character is what's known as the pale one, and basically the character description is just you are an unknown horror. So like you just this random kind of I like to say it's like Eldritch-esque. So it's and nobody in the world knows anything about what you are or where you're from. And basically my character's backstory is just like I was fished out of the sea. So they just, and it's nice that there's this level of, you know, okay, you can add stuff to it. So as we're growing, I've kind of decided like, okay, maybe my character is like, because it's this weird unknowable creature, maybe that's it's not one person, maybe it's lots of people within one vessel, you know. And so I said that to the DM and he was like, I love it. So it's just this, it has this nice level of, can we do this? Well, let's find out.
Yeah, I have like I have this character in my back pocket. I haven't named him yet, but I'll get to that at some point. There's this race of bird type people called Kenku, which can't basically they're cursed, so they can't have any like they can't have any original thought, but they're amazing at mimicking everything. So I went, oh, I'm going to create a Iago type rogue. You know, so just like everything people say like, I'm repeating what you say.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I quite
again,
like
have him join our pirate crew as a pirate.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, Katie. What were
no,
you
I
gonna
was just gonna say I quite like the randomness, like, because for me it wasn't so much a case of make a character. It was kind of more there was a list of pick your class, and then I just rolled the dice for everything else. So my character is like hyper flexible, so I can like, we call it frubing my way through cracks. You know, like a froob. So it's like, you know, there's a trap door or something, but it's locked, and he's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I'm gonna froob down there. And like even things like the name, so it gives you, you know, a list of words kind of thing, you know, those things where it's like pick your birthday, pick your, you know, whatever. Well, this was like roll the dice to see what your name is.
Class.
And mine just so happened to be painful reflects the moon. So
that's
it's
awesome.
it's just like random stuff like that, you know. And we have other, like our party is kind of, we have this, like one of the guys is, I think he's like an alchemist, but he also has 4 monkeys. So he's like, anytime there's a fight, he's just trying to wrangle all these monkeys. And then we have like a fighter who can turn into a rat at will. And then our other party member is like a hermit who so far has not shown much interest in trying to actually find out what he can do and what he can't do. So he just whiffs it a lot.
Fair.
Yeah. So it's fun.
Like there's one of the D&D books they made, actually, Xanathar's Guide to Everything. It's got like, I guess all a third of the book is those sorts of choices. Like if you're not great on creative writing, you're not great at kind of thinking up backstories, it's got chapters and chapters and chapters of tables and tables and tables of just building a person, just building a personality, or at least kind of giving you little things to kind of spark ideas. To the point where there was one evening where us and our friends, we weren't even making characters. We just like used it as a form of tarot and just rolled and just like kind of used it to divine, like, I guess this is how my day's been.
But it is awesome. Fun.
My parents died in a raid.
It is fun, and it kind of takes that pressure off as well, because you know when they're like pick a character and you're like, look at all these options, this like you said, pages and pages and pages and pages of stuff, and you're like, I don't even know where to begin. So it's kind of nice with, you know, with Morkborg that it's a small list. It's like 1 page per class. And it's just roll the dice for your name, roll the dice for your backstory, roll the dice for your special ability. You know, it's and that's it. it's really good.
Yeah. Like, well, it's always, I think, again, especially when you're trying to do character creation, I think it's always nicer to have like a shorter list to work with initially,
Yeah.
because otherwise, like, it just gets like, I think, like, again, using like the most recent character I did create in D&D was a wizard, and trying to with wizards, like, you get like the biggest selection of spells of any other spellcasting character, which also means that, like, you have to read up rules for every single spellcasting spell there is that's available for wizards, which means that you're spending a lot of time going, right, so do I want to have alarm, or do I want to have aid? And just try it, just, and that's like just the beginning of it, and like that's even before you've done any rolls. Going through that much rules, it can make it very difficult,
Yeah.
and very painful to actually like get into the game straight away and actually start playing. So like I think anything that cuts that down is always going to be an improvement.
Yeah, I think that's what
Oh, yeah,
kind
like,
of
I think
puts a lot of people off initially is the fact that because I don't know about other people, but with myself, it kind of takes me a while to get into these things. So like I haven't even really started properly role playing yet because I'm still figuring out what it is. This feels weird, that kind of thing. So I think it's nice if there's less to go on initially, and then as you're enjoying it, as you get more into it, you build on it from there.
Like, I definitely would agree with that, though. Like, I think it's important to, I think with like any game, I mean, it's important to have like a level of like, having like an element of pick up and play, because it can just, I mean, it's probably one of those things where I feel like knowing what I know now, I would probably say to any new players, don't pick wizard, because it probably is one of the most rules heavy classes to play straight away. Pick sorcerer or warlock and have a much, it's like you still get that spellcasting, or bard, yeah, and you still get that spellcasting element to it, but there's just less of it, so you're not as bogged down. And I think like those kind of elements just make things a bit more manageable. Alternatively, I mean, like, there's also, I mean, like, yeah, stuff like ranger has spells as well, but like not as much. But don't play ranger, because ranger's pretty bad. But like, yeah, I think it's one of those things for like I think for newer players, it's also just about like this level of minefield, because like finding players who want to play regularly is super difficult.
Yeah.
Finding a DM who actually wants people to have a good time is super difficult. But if you're fortunate enough to find them, then you're well on your way to actually having a really, really good time. And then you just have to hope that like the kind of campaign you're doing is what's meeting your expectations. That might not necessarily happen, because you might want to have like a more horror themed experience, and then if you're doing that and you're playing D&D, you probably want to look at Call of Cthulhu more so, or even maybe Morkborg might be even more up your alley as well. But again, there's so many different games that, like, if you have a really good idea of what you want, you should be able to find it. But trying to find people to play with will always be the thing that's going to make it really difficult to play fully.
Yeah, and I think like even a lot of the people that we play with, they also play D&D. So it's kind of finding the time then, because if they're playing D&D once a week and we're playing Morkborg once a week, it's like finding days that don't clash, and still also giving them time off as well.
Absolutely, because I mean these are games that even when they are rules light, they're time consuming. You know, like I think like I think like the shortest session I've had where I still felt like I got things done was like 2.5 hours long, which you can put it this way, that's 15 minutes longer than Captain America Winter Soldier, and there's nowhere near as much detail that happens in that time.
Yeah, I mean we've been meeting up on like Thursdays, and we usually say we'll go for 3 hours, but sometimes it ends up being 4 hours.
Yeah,
just because either you get into it or the 3 hour mark hits, but you're in the middle of a fight, so you can't just like stop mid fight.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, Brent. I'm just impressed that you have the runtime of Captain America: The Winter Soldier burned into your brain.
I do, yeah. I don't know why it's in there. It's just there.
That's that. Oh yeah, like we planned a one shot for New Year's, and one shots notoriously for you think like doing it all in one session is easy. It's the most difficult thing, and so we planned on having that for the day. But the girl whose house we were planning on running it in, she was like, yeah, we could we could start at like 4. I'm like, Rebecca, we planned on starting at 12. This is the day.
Yeah.
You didn't think this wasn't going to be a 3-hour thing? No, we have 8 hours put aside so we can finish this one game.
Yeah, and then even at that, it kind of depends on the players as well, because you might have 3 hours worth of story. But like when we started out, especially with me, because I didn't know how anything worked in these kind of games, so I was kind of relying on the other players to guide me through more or less. But the other players were just as reluctant to do things as I was. So, we were in the first room, which was essentially just step across a stream. But we were in there for like 10 minutes because nobody wanted to be like, okay, let's move on,
Yeah, absolutely. Like again, there's a player in my group who like the way he approaches everything is very slowly, where it's like, okay, like there was one time where he was playing a wizard, which was not the best role for him to do, but he would go like, okay, so I need to think, and then go, okay, so I don't have any level 3 spots left, don't have any level 2 slots left, I have 2 level 1 slots left, but I don't want to use those spells right now, so I have to go to my cantrips. Right, I'm going to cast. What's the resist? Is this monster resistant to anything? It's resistant. It's resistant to fire. I'm going to cast Ray of Frost, and that's how he would go every turn. He'd be like, "Oh, okay, that's how this is then."
Yeah. So yeah, like it's going to depend on how quickly you get through it by kind of how eager people are, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, like I mean, some people they just really have to think through everything, which can slow things down.
And I'll put my hand up. I am one of those people, but I'm still learning,
Yeah.
So like it gets to my turn and they're like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, what can I do?
Yeah, well, I mean, like that's also like
that's
sorry, Kev.
That's totally fine. I think that's just kind of to emphasize that's totally cool that that's how you are. Just kind of to make that clear to everyone listening. Not everyone is programmed to be able to make those kind of split-second decisions. It's a game. You want to try and make the right turn. So if you need to, take your time.
Yeah, you want to play in a way that's fun for you.
Absolutely. But that's the thing. And if it's a case that I mean, again, the only thing I would ever say to people who do struggle is that it does take a while to get used to the game, but you'll figure out what are your, it's trying to, if you're conscious that you feel like you're slowing down the game, best thing to do is to kind of as soon as your turn is over, start planning your next turn as you're going along. But that way, it just means that it just means that when you do that, when you get to your turn, now you still might have to deliberate a bit more, but by that point you should be well on your way. It might even be a case of having to ask the DM a couple of questions or whatever, but once you get to that point, you should be flying. But it just means that the flow kind of keeps going for everyone, because that's also important. But
or even something we do every once in a while, just if you don't know what to do yet, just say, can you come back to me in about 2 turns? Just I'm trying to see how things are going. Just can I waylay things for a minute? Not even a whole round. Just give me 5 seconds. Let someone else go.
Sure. Yeah, that's also totally reasonable.
That's something I've learned as well, is to just hold if you don't know what to do. Just hold.
Yeah. And again, I mean, that's also one of those things, because again, it is possible to have DMs who are very much this is the initiative order. You're not disrupting the initiative order so you can think about what you're doing. It's dude, this is a game. We're playing a dice game right now. Come on.
Yeah.
Like,
We're being
let's
super
just change
nerdy
the
right
initiative
now.
order so we can think
We're playing
about
a
it.
fantasy maths game. How about you chill out for a minute?
Yeah.
We're not going for the gold medal.
Yeah.
I
Like,
could
we're not
sincerely talk about RPGs with you guys all evening, but we
Mm.
are at time.
fair.
I think like
Sorry,
we gotta put
Dara.
the full points. This has been a blast. I've had a lot of fun this evening, but I think that is where we'll have to call our wraps. So before we go, Bryn, is there anything you would like to tell the good people about?
No, just have fun and be kind to your DMs. Be kind to your players. Players be kind to your DMs. DMs are people too.
As much as we lead you to not believe that. Wise words to live by. And Katie.
Yeah, a couple
and
things actually. So everything has been really quiet for doing it for the exposure because I've been like ill and stuff. But we have an editor on board now, which means I don't have to edit the show anymore, which is fantastic. So we're doing like a kind of a transition period right now, so things might be a bit spotty for a bit, but then we will get back on track. And also I have teamed up, Acutely Morbid has teamed up with New Wolf Studios. So we are creating like exclusive jewelry and stuff for them, and they are launching their website soon. So keep an eye on that. If you want to follow them on Instagram, you can follow New Wolf Studios or New Wolf Apparel.
Ooh.
Very awesome. Sounds great.
It's happening.
It's happening.
It's happening, you guys.
Oh my god. Yeah, that sounds fantastic, Katie. As I crowbarred into the show earlier, very thematically appropriate with all the RPG talk. You can find me every Tuesday evening on Twitch, twitch.tv/ConnorRain, where I am running a Greek-themed campaign. This wonderful book right here, a lot of fun. We have fun playing games with friends. That's what this was about. Otherwise, Anime Crash Course is still on a bit of a hiatus, or you can follow me over on Twitter at KevTalika94, where I have been mostly posting Final Fantasy XIV stuff because I have lost control of my life. But as always, if you want to follow the show more, you can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, all at Nerd to Know. This has been the show. Thanks, guys. It's been a blast.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.